All right, we are live and obviously in a different location than the place that I normally do this from, not only on Fridays, but most days, including Sunday night. So we're taking a bit of a break from the hill country. Speaking of break, I had a line break in my plumbing uh, just outside my house, coming from the meter to the main. It's the main line. And that broke, shit, probably, I don't know, man, probably about maybe 2 weeks ago. But it started to break more and more and more. You know what I mean? Like, I started to notice some like puddling in this one part of my lawn. It wasn't too bad, and I thought, well, it rained, so maybe it's just an accumulation of rain. Well, the puddling got worse, and the next thing you know, I had a little swamp there, and that was I discovered that last week, right? So I called the plumber, and basically, I was without water most of the week. And it's amazing if you plan correctly how much, how little water you actually need to have in order to sort of get by, right? Like if you time your showers maybe every other day or something like that, or every 3 days, depending upon your level of activity, um, you don't need that much water. You just don't. I mean, I think your body does in terms of what you're drinking, but I was getting that from, my water jugs and my water urn. So I wasn't drinking tap water. Uh, Certainly not watering any vegetation because we'd had some rain, and of course during a heavy drought period, it would be much more complicated than that. But it was very instructive to see just how little water. And I'm one person, right? If you have multiple people, of course, that's going to amplify and get bigger. But it was an interesting exercise, and so now we've got that solved, and no more $400 water bill. Oh, that was not fun. Anyway, how is everybody today? I hope we're having a good Friday. A good Friday. It's a very interesting time of year, isn't it? Easter, the crucifixion, the resurrection, the season goes along with the spring, the resurrection of the earth, life comes back again. And then, of course, we have the holy or cosmic resurrection, which Sunday is always associated with. And it's funny how Easter Sunday is always this floating date. Like Thanksgiving is always going to be on the 25th, no matter what, right? But Easter Sunday sort of changes year to year. And it's a very interesting time to contemplate this whole idea of the resurrection and the upcoming solar eclipse, which, while not happening on Easter Sunday, clearly we are in that, week and a half before and week and a half after that 3 week window for the eclipse. And so we're in that window now. So technically speaking, Easter Sunday is occurring uh, in the eclipse zone, not the eclipse path, but the eclipse zone. And I think it's a very powerful. It's not just a symbol. There's something else going on here, right? There's something else going on here that I think is much bigger than we can wrap our heads around. And I am not a dispensationalist, and I don't necessarily believe in the second coming as the way that it's portrayed in the Bible, which I guess would make me a heretic, but that wouldn't be anything new. But I do believe that uh, there has been an event that has staged or planned for sometime in the future. And the event that I'm talking about is the conscious insertion or reinsertion. We'll call it the reinsertion of the Christ energy into creation. And that's what I would call this the second coming. Not that it hasn't been here all along, because it has. And that's why I call it a reinsertion or a reminder, or, well, for lack of a better term, a reset in some ways. And it feels like historically we have been taken off that track and that path deliberately. So when you look at things like the Kennedy assassination, which is significant, or 9/11, which is significant, or COVID, which is significant, or the Great Depression, or the Federal Reserve Act, or the Vietnam War. I mean, there are all these things, and they're all sort of related. They're all like birds on a wire. But I think ultimately, those events happen to reorder the physical world. And a lot of people talk about these events as being rituals, and I would agree with that they are rituals. And the ritual is to continue to divert us from this ultimate destination, which is this for lack of, and I'm not using this in a Gnostic sense. I'm just using it because it's a word that people would understand. This gnosis that takes place where all of a sudden people become aware at a fundamental level of this energy that is profoundly transformational. And the thing that, and again, I don't go to church, and I wouldn't call myself a traditional Christian by any sense, because I would certainly be judged accordingly by many. But the thing that I always loved about the idea of Christianity is that you didn't have to be an intellectual, that you didn't have to be a priest. And when I say a priest, I'm talking about like a Pharisee, right? You didn't have to be a Pharisee, or you didn't have to be a studied and learned alchemist, right? Even though those things are kind of interesting and can open up the secrets of the universe, right? You didn't need any of that, right? And you didn't even need to be an intellectual. You didn't even need to be an intellectual. And in fact, being an intellectual might even set you back a little bit. And this is the thing that that fundamentally and conceptually I love about Christianity, is that you could be a person of somewhat limited capacity or average. And if you had the requisite faith, that requisite faith would instruct you and guide you and uplift you, and even in many ways improve and amplify your circumstance. And this is the thing that I've always found very powerful about the concept of Christianity, that at its core, it is the most, I would say, democratic application of faith. And yes, you could know scripture and you could, quote chapter and verse, but how many corrupt preachers have we seen that can do that? Their tongues are slippery, right? Slippery tongues, and they're very good at it. But are they innocent enough, or are they faithful enough to really understand the concept of what we're talking about? So to me, that's always been, in a lot of ways, the saving grace of the religion or of the faith, that you didn't need to be an intellectual, that you didn't need to be a member of the priest class, and all you needed was to have the hookup. And you had the hookup by having faith, right? And that was an individual's journey, and love, right? Faith and love, and then theoretically all things are revealed to you. So, and I actually have an empirical piece of my life that backs this up. And I'll share a story with you, and we'll get into some of the horrors of the day. But it's a very interesting story, and one that really touched me. So a long time ago, I was in my 20s, and I used to do a lot of after school work with kids. So the rec program. I was the after school rec guy, and I did that when I was in college. It was a lot of fun. So one day, this woman walks into the rec center, and she's a nice older woman, right? And she's looking for somebody to help her son learn how to throw a frisbee, because her son is going to be in the Special Olympics. And I said, well, tell me more about your son. And she goes on, and I find out he's actually older, right? He's not a kid. He's a grown man. In fact, he was older than I was at the time. And he was pretty functional. Like, he could drive, and I'll never forget, they had a Chrysler Imperial, which was a really cool car. And I said, well, I think I could help him. She said, really? Yeah, I think I can help him. So I started this friendship with this guy, and and he could drive, but he wasn't very coordinated. So I'm really trying to help him throw this fucking frisbee, right? Like, this is how you do it, And so eventually the Special Olympics rolls around, and this woman who I'm talking about helped Kennedy start the Special Olympics. So she was, and I didn't know this until later on when it came to my attention that she actually helped start the Special Olympics. And so it was in Berkeley at the university. So they're doing all the Special Olympic shit. And she introduces me to Dick Sargent, who was Samantha's husband on Bewitched. And he was a big part of the Special Olympics. And so he's the one that told me that this fellow's mother helped start the Special Olympics. And I'm like, wow, it's a pretty big deal. And she actually, was working with, if I'm not mistaken, Kennedy to get it done. So he throws this frisbee, right? And it's like when the frisbee lands, stops. When it stops, that's what they count as the furthest throw. So I'm like, come on, man, you can do this. So he throws this frisbee, right? He throws the frisbee, and it kind of does this number where it gets completely sideways like a wheel and hits the ground and just starts fucking rolling. Like, this thing rolls forever. And it was like he won this event, but he probably only threw the frisbee maybe, I don't know, 20 feet in the air, but it rolls like a hubcap for about another, I don't know, 60 feet, right? It's like, it's like, so that's how it counted, right? So, and it won. So I became kind of a friend of this guy. And I think his mother would say, hey, would you mind like taking him to the movies or something like that? So yeah, sure. So we became friends. And then, so I think I took him to go see The Neverending Story. I think that was the movie. And then he hands me this piece of paper later on. And God, I wish I still had this piece of paper. I had it for a long time. And he was trying to write me a thank you note. And it was, the script was kind of, rough. Words were rough. Syntax was rough. But I could kind of get the gist of what he was trying to say. And then all of a sudden, the writing changes and it becomes like clear and third person. And I forget the exact message, but it was something like, we are well pleased by what thine is doing in helping thy brother or brethren or something like that. And I'm like, what the fuck? Right? It's like, where did this come from? And I asked him, I read through it and I said, did you write this? And he was very proud of it. He was very proud that he had written it. And it was to me, right? Like that was in a lot of ways the definition of what I'm talking about. Somebody who had unfortunately had a terrible uh, mishap when he was young, and they screwed up and they shot barium into his spine and it really fucked him up. And so the family had won a huge lawsuit against the doctor in the hospital. So he was set for life, right? He was set for life, but it affected everything from that point forward, including his motor skills, including his speech, and but he and his mother went to church all the time, right? And it was like that was it. That was it. He didn't have to be a scholar or a magus. All he had to be was kind of loving, and this thing came through. So that was kind of a landmark realization for me when that happened, and I think that what I'm talking about is at the core of that. And so what we have been inundated with in our culture and in our world are things that are much more complicated and dark. And those complicated and dark stratagems have been consistently used to take us off this track. And even organized religion itself has been designed to take us off this track, because there's always an interpreter. There's always the third party. And sometimes third parties can be good. Sometimes third parties can be helpful. They can help you talk through things or understand things. But ultimately, it really comes down to you and your primary experience with what we would call spirit or the spirit of God. And it just feels like, and I'm just piecing this all together in my brain as we, go through all these crazy events that are accumulating around us, that it all feels like, in as much as we can pinpoint the darkness, like there's CERN. They're going to fire CERN up. Yesterday on 15 Minutes, I talked about NASA firing the 3 rockets into the Eclipse sun, and the rockets are known as APEP, which is also known as Apophis, and a serpent god that consumes the sun, the god of the underworld, right? So we've got CERN, we've got the 3 missiles. What else do we have? We have the Heifer, which I'll talk a little bit about. That's part of the thumbnail today. That's going on. What else? What am I? We had the boat, right? We had this boat collapse, the bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge. I think it's interesting, even like the name, right? Like Francis, associated with Saint Francis, and key, right? The key to, being able to be open to this idea of the spirit, right? Which is something that Saint Francis was clearly about, right? So you just take the first 2 words, like Francis and key. There's that, right? There's also this other story that's emerging that I think is very serious, and we're going to cover a little of that today. But we have all these things that are happening. The Diddy thing, right? And once you go down the Diddy hole, pun slightly intended, once you go down the Diddy hole, there are things you cannot unsee. You can't unsee them. And that's also, floating around in the background as a program. So all these things are happening, and, one could make a case that they're all being deliberately staged to some extent to keep us from experiencing something very different. That, and I think that this is important to know, that if we were looking at something like the return of what I would call the cosmic Christ, right? Everybody gets lit up, and all of a sudden, our priorities change, and everything changes. The dimensions change. Everything changes, right? If something of that magnitude was going to happen, and you had these controllers, these social engineers, who through the use of symbols and rituals and timing and everything that we've come to learn and know in a rapid and a very accelerated way over, say, the last 4 years, wouldn't they want an equal amount of distraction and destruction and symbolic manipulation to counteract what was coming? And I think, and it's all very interesting that it's happening around this time, in this time of the resurrection, right? I don't think that there's any mistakes here. Like, this is not coincidental. So a lot of people are very stressed out, and they're feeling like reality is quite challenged and challenging. And I'm not going to deny that. It is. It is. And I also feel like we're really on the cusp of flipping this thing around. Because and this has nothing to do with politics. It doesn't have to do with RFK2. It doesn't have to do with Biden. It doesn't have to do with Trump. It doesn't have to do with Ron Paul. This is something at completely another level. And I'm just going by my instinct here and looking at all these things that are piling up. And there's got to be a reason. It's not just, well, we're going to accelerate events and we're going to tap into the power of the Black Sun. And there's a whole Black Sun cult, by the way. There are people that worship the Black Sun. And there was an American poet. What was his name? Harry. I always forget his last name. He lived in Paris, and all he wrote was poems about the Black Sun. His fucking OCD about the Black Sun. There's a Black Sun cult, right? And there are people who are convinced that they can use this power to generate a world that is an eternal prison and a hell on earth. And I'm pretty convinced of that. And it's this coming eclipse. So they're all in because they know that something else is coming. And you hear all these stories about the royals ducking out. Well, why? Is it Nibiru? Is it the Satan's Comet? Maybe. You hear all these stories about these billionaires with their bunkers, and some of them are quite impressive. They've got bowling alleys. Some of them have subterranean lakes. I mean, some of this shit is so built out, right? Because they think that they know what's coming. And what they believe is coming is a catastrophe. And maybe it's a catastrophe for them. Maybe that's the catastrophe, right? Maybe that is the catastrophe. And what is it? What's What is the saying from the Bible? A camel through the eye of the needle has a better chance of reaching heaven than a rich man. I mean, I'm paraphrasing it, right? I think there's some truth to that. So all these people of wealth and means are kind of ducking out because they think they know what's coming, and something is coming, but it may not be the same thing that that they think is coming. And even if it is the thing that I'm talking about, I'm not sure it makes their world better. Although a true and loving God would rise all boats, right? Raise all boats, which would seem unfair. But so I feel like we're in this really interesting nexus point. And will it happen this weekend, next weekend, next week? I don't know. They say you never know the time, right? But it feels like that's what's happening to me. That something huge on a spiritual level is about to unfold. And the darkness is doing everything they can in order to pull out all the stops to keep it from happening in the short and midterm. The truth is coming out. We're starting to see behind the scenes in ways that we've only been hinted at. This whole Diddy thing goes very deep, very, very deep. There's I think a live stream on IG or something like that, and LeBron James talks about going to the Diddy parties. Ain't not a party like a Diddy party. He didn't say no party, ain't no party. He said ain't not a party like a Diddy party. So how deep does this go? If it extends into the realm of like athletes and other celebrities, maybe even owners of sports teams, like this is big. Now, what will come of it, I don't know. But I think there are a lot of people right now that are shitting their pants because they don't know what's going to happen. They're frantically calling people that they do know. Oh, don't worry, man. You're good. You're good. How do you know? I just know you're good. Don't worry about it. And a couple of days later, hey, man, how you doing? Starting to get a little close here. Starting to get a little hot. You may want to duck out for a while, right? And all of a sudden they start to get mixed messages about what's going on. So is it any coincidence that this stuff is coming out now? No, I don't think there's any coincidence about it at all. It's all part of it. It's all part of it. And if you have eyes to see, you can see what's happening. Look at what's happening in a certain country in the Middle East, and the death and the destruction and the toll that it's taking on very innocent people. Again, it's all revelation, right? This is what revelation is about. And again, I'm not talking about it from a particular religious sense, but we're seeing things now. Things are being revealed. And this is what fundamentally revelation is all about. The truth is exposed. It's funny. We started the year off with Cat Williams on Shannon Sharp. And look, I'm not here to turn Cat Williams into a hero or a whistleblower or a truth teller, but he did say some things that were very powerful. And he said, this year is the year that it all comes out. And then 2 months later, all the trash around Diddy starts to float to the surface. People start coming out. They start testifying. They start spilling the beans. And I don't think we're done. We're not even close to being done. And so for people who are hungry for the truth, these are like breadcrumbs. And for people that want to live with their daily dose of distraction, And what I mean by that, I'm not talking about sort of the tabloid nature of this, although that's true. There is a very dark tabloid nature, and we do traffic in a lot of distraction, and we sometimes conflate distraction with revelation, and they're very different. And so there's that, and then there's just the distraction of the entertainment potential itself. Hip hop music and I don't know, tabloid drama, all that shit, right? That's all distraction. And so now we have an environment where revelation is competing with distraction. And it's very important to distinguish the difference between the two. And that's up to every individual. A revelation leads to truth, and distraction leads us away from the truth. So you all have to use your inner guidance system to figure out which one is which for you. And there's some things I don't talk about because I think they're distractions. And I haven't spent a lot of time on the Diddy thing only because, we get so tied into chasing the rabbit. And then we chase the rabbit down the rabbit hole. And then we lose the rabbit. Right? Like that happened with Epstein. And I spent a lot of time, like I started talking about Epstein in 2016. When the first copies of his address book came out, we started to talk about Epstein. And it felt like at the time that this was going to be one of the biggest scandals in modern history and could threaten to take down the entire establishment. And if it had been handled properly, it would have. But it was completely mishandled. And it was managed mostly by Alan Dershowitz. And again, I know there are a lot of people that really like Trump and think that Trump could, turn the ship around, but that all happened on Trump's watch, right? It all happened on Trump's watch. And Dershowitz, who's a friend of Trump's, essentially brought this thing to light, and there was a plan behind it, which was to extract Jeffrey Epstein. It was an extraction plan, and eventually it led him into the jail in New York, and then we know what happens next. The cameras go off, and then supposedly he hangs himself, right? And then, okay, well, that's done. Move on from that. And then, of course, we the miraculous arrival of Ghislaine Maxwell in Vermont, I believe, or New Hampshire, one of the two. And because she had, she'd been posting on Reddit, basically saying it's the best state, one of the best states for relations with minors. Right? Like that was one of the reasons why she supposedly went there. But I always thought, well, why is she going there? If this thing is hot, why is she putting herself on U.S. territory and soil? Is it because she feels like she's immune, and that they have all the videotape and all the information, all the evidence? Was she dumb? I don't think she's dumb. Ghislaine Maxwell's not dumb. And I always thought it was odd that she would, wind up in the U.S. just so that she could be picked up, tried. Her trial seemed very strange, didn't it? Like we saw pictures of somebody behind fucking, I don't know, like a sound booth or something. And we couldn't even know if it was Ghislaine. I mean, do we even really know if Ghislaine Maxwell's in prison? I don't know. And maybe she's registered somewhere under some prison somewhere. But again, we know that the system plays fast and loose with people that they have an investment in. So nothing comes of Ghislaine Maxwell. And I know that there are people, again, that will say, well, this person's getting arrested or this person's being taken out of circulation. And that could be true. I don't claim to know everything. But at the end of the day, what I do know is that a corrupt system, which theoretically could have been taken to its knees, is still in place. So you look at, the proof of an event or the proof of actions. So that's what I'm seeing. And maybe it's just so corrupt that even if they did take people out, that somehow it's so corrupt that it doesn't really matter, right? So I feel like, just from a philosophical, metaphysical, and spiritual perspective, that we are on this cusp of this potentially profound, I guess I would call it the reemergence of the cosmic Christ. That's what I would call it. And it's interesting because this phrase, Christ is King, has become very popular lately. And I'm always interested in the timing of words and the timing of concepts. So astrologically, we know that we have Saturn in the sign of Pisces. And Saturn represents the Hierophant in archetypes and the Tarot, even though in the major arcana, the Hierophant is often associated with the sign of Taurus. I believe it's very Saturnian. The Hierophant is Saturnian because the Hierophant passes judgment and occupies the seat of God in this world, right? Like the Pope is the Hierophant, whatever you think of the Pope and the position of the Pope. The priest, the modern day priest or your minister, they're all Hierophants. Their job is to be the intercessionary between humanity and the divine, and to instruct humanity as to how to operate in this world and the next. That is their role. So, so the Hierophant disseminates wisdom through organizing principles, or organizing principles through wisdom, supposedly, right? And it's through that we establish an order. And there are religious Hierophants and there are political Hierophants, and they're all supposed to help us establish some form of order. The president is a Hierophant, right? He's a Hierophant. That's what he's supposed to do. He plays the modern day role of the king, who is supposed to be, again, or the queen, the divine intercessionary between God and man and woman, right? And so the president has a huge role in that regard, and is supposed to help with this whole idea of social order. So with Saturn in Pisces, we have this manifestation of the Hierophant and this whole idea of Christ as King. And again, I'm not here to preach the gospel. I'm just noticing. I'm noticing the language. And it feels like more than ever, like more than I've ever experienced in the 63 years that I've been on this planet. It feels more like the drama of ancient Israel than ever before. Right? I mean, we have this whole again, it's this phrase, it's this vibe, Christ is King. And then you have this whole drama going on with Ben Shapiro and this Rabbi Shmuley character. And all these people now are starting to emerge from the woodworks, right? And they are beginning to take on the personage of the same group that theoretically Christ was trying to teach. but those people rejected the teachings. And it feels like more than ever, we're kind of in that dramatic space of contrast. And I'm thinking, this is interesting. This is I can't remember another time, and particularly on a seasonal basis, that this dialectic has ever been more in our face than it is now. And you even have, we'll play this out with Candace Owens, right? Candace Owens gets released by the Daily Wire, and they're all mum, hush, hush. And then you have Michael Knowles. And Michael Knowles, who is the godfather of Candace Owens' daughter, I think, one of her kids, and his best friends with her husband. He used that word, best friend. And he has a moment to address critics, right? The act of cutting her loose. And what does he do? He does really nothing. He says, well, I'm friends with Candace, and I'm friends with her husband, and I'm friends with Jeremy. And believe it or not, I'm friends with Ben. And Ben even negotiated my first contract. And what does Candace Owens do? She defriends him on TikTok and across social media. So in that sense, what role does Michael Knowles play? He's playing the role of Judas. He's choosing 40 pieces of silver over the friendship and the loyalty of his friend, who theoretically was crucified for speaking out. And again, I'm just bringing this up because it is kind of this weird biblical mirror. And we see in front of us, right? We see the Pharisees. They're here. We see the Sanhedrin. They're here. And we see this drama being carried out now. And in the background is this phrase, Christ. I've never seen this before. And again, I'm not a born again Christian. I don't go to church, right? But you can't help but not notice that there is a biblical drama taking place right before our very eyes, and it's happening on Easter weekend, and it's happening a week before the eclipse, and it's happening just before they slaughter this red heifer in Jerusalem. Like, we are in freaking biblical times. And I'm sure that there are some people out there who are going to say, hey, did you see this guy? Like maybe this will get into like the born again community. I don't know. Did you see this guy? Did you see what he's talking about? Yeah, this is different. This is different. You know, we in the Hill Country in October, you know, we were here for the eclipse in October. And you know, it was powerful. And it was also, I think, really catalyzing and brought a lot of people together here in Kerrville in the Hill Country. It was great. We had a great experience, fantastic speakers. Longo popped in from Florida and broke down Florida's Eden, and Shauna Home was here and, you know, brought us some really good information from her world. It was a great event. This doesn't feel like that. This energy does not feel like that at all. It feels big, feels really, really big. And people keep asking me, what are you going to do? Or what should you do? And I'm like, well, you know, I'm treating this eclipse with a massive amount of respect. Let's put it that way. This is not an event to trivialize. And you know, the eclipse in October was in Libra, which is very social. And this is in Aries, which I don't really consider to be social. And so everybody has to develop their own relationship around this thing, which is very Aries-like. So here we are. I'd like to know what you think. So I'm going to go through some comments here, and I'll see what you guys have to say about what I believe. And I don't think it's made up either. because that's always a part of sort of, oh, look at this. Look what they're doing. They're doing everything they can to pump revelation. Oh, they're doing everything they can to reinforce the fact that the rapture's coming and they're going to get out of this shithole and they're going to be able to watch. And, my image of the people in the rapture is that they're all sitting in those giant leather recliners, right? And they're all sitting back and they've got a big screen of all the hell that's taking place on Earth, and they're eating popcorn, right? And they're not even drinking Diet Coke, because in the rapture world you can drink Coke that has sugar or even high fructose, right? And that's and like a 70-ounce big gulp, with popcorn, and they're just sitting there and watching all hell break loose, right? I think that's really what they're counting on. And so some of these events that we see, well, here we go. There's another sign, another sign, another sign. I'm not one of those people, but you cannot deny what I would call the religious drama that's going on right now that mirrors the season of the time that we're in. And we have a harbinger of something really powerful. And one of the things that, we talk about and have talked about with the eclipse that happened in August of 2017, and this eclipse 7 years later, is that it looks like a cross, right? It looks like a cross. And what is the symbol of what we've been talking about for the last 47 minutes? It's a cross, right? It is the crucifixion and it is the resurrection. Whatever your religious beliefs are, whether you think this person existed or not, the symbolism is there. It's a cross. Yeah, it's an X, but still, it's a cross. A cross is an X. So we're living in, this is a really powerful, powerful time. Extremely powerful time. And it almost feels like we have this opportunity to be liberated and to punch through this thing that we're in, or be trapped in 10,000 years more of hell, right? It almost feels like that. It almost feels like the stakes are that high. And I don't believe we're going to be in 10,000 years or more hell, although some people that might be their reality. And for other people, that may not be their reality. So that's what it feels like. And and we could be having this conversation 4 weeks from now. Like, well, what happened? Right? Well, look, this is just the beginning. And again, when we were in the Hill Country in October, I talked about that this is just the beginning. And everything really, really gets ramped up in a big way at the end of 2025, when we have Saturn and Neptune move into the sign of Aries together. And it's that 3-year period, which is critical to what happens at the end of this decade. So we're just getting ramped up. That said, could everything change in a moment? Absolutely. Without a doubt. So let's see what you guys have to say here. Let's see what Claire has. It is, and they try to stop powerful people uniting in powerful unions because it sends love to the world. What does Zully have to say? Yeah, I don't think it's raptured, no. Maybe like we're in an astrological cycle. Yes. By the way, I don't really believe in the rapture. It's the rapture is a modern contrivance, but there are people that do believe in the rapture. And of course, they're more than, that's one of the reasons why you don't have a 2-state solution. Because the rapturites need to have Israel be one state in order for theoretically Rambo Jesus to come back. Here we go. Full Scorpio moon, destruction of all lies, not afraid. That happens in May. Just saying. Curtis Moonflower, embrace ball busting. I don't know, man. I've been with a few ball busters, and I was glad to unlock from those embraces. Just saying. We realize that there are two sides, duality and having knowledge to raise your vibe. But in order to do so, you have to understand both sides. Knowledge is power. Yes. But all knowledge is not equal. You know, I was reading about some of the Diddy stuff today, right? And, you know, one of the things that they get into, or one of the things that sort of has emerged, and I've known about this for a while, is the whole idea of sodomy. And why sodomy and why anal sex is such a big deal in like these in-group rituals, right? And what they do is they reverse the kundalini. Instead of connecting to the crown, right? Because when you have the anal penetration, it gets right to the base of your spinal column, which is the root, right? It's the root, and then it's the fruit. And so what happens is that they reverse the kundalini, and then they blow open the first and second chakra. And so the person, instead of going to a cosmic and heavenly realm, goes to a hell realm, and they're met there with very powerful beings, which is where your knowledge piece comes into play, right? And so this is why this whole act and ritual is very important to a particular group, and it's an esoteric technique, and it's called the Key of Solomon, by the way. All right, what else do we have? Simulation Robert script playing out. I don't know. Maybe. I just find it really interesting that we're having the same kind of strife and discord in a collective way, right? At the same, like theoretically, Ben Shapiro is a Pharisee. He's a Pharisee. He's a Sanhedrin. He's a judge, right? That's the role he plays. And all these other people are kind of lining up to play that role. We have this Christ is King thing sort of floating around in the background, right? We have really the crucifixion of Candace Owens, the betrayal of Candace Owens with Michael Knowles for 40 pieces of silver. The whole thing is just getting played out, whether it's a simulation or not. The thing with simulation for me is that it just feels so plastic. Oh, it's just a fucking simulation. Just take the glasses off and you can just go do something else, right? There's something so temporary about this idea of a simulation. And I think that there are probably layers of reality that are related to what we call a simulacrum. And then there are other layers of reality that aren't. And I don't think it's just as easy as saying, well, we're in the Matrix and all the Matrix. No, I think there are layers here. And, just like there's supposedly 12 dimensions. So that's kind of the answer to your question, I hope. Rapture is modern fallacy. I totally agree with you. It's a modern contrivance. Didn't exist. Did not exist until Cyrus Schofield got his hands on, what's his name? John Nelson Darby's ideas around the rapture. Didn't exist before then. Talking about the probabilities and interdimensional realities. This is the intersection of You make your own reality scenario. Maybe. But if we all make our own realities, then what do we share together? Right? Well, it's my truth. Well, this is my truth. This is my truth. Well, it's my truth. So we all have 3 billion versions of the truth. Good luck with that. What people call rapture, I call the harvest, and it is not fruitfulness on our behalf. Okay. Let's see. Yes, Robert, my born day is May 1st. There you go. What's Christina? We co-create with the divine. That is an important distinction. It isn't just our own will creating reality. I agree with that. That, I think, is a really good summation of kind of what we were talking about or throwing around there. Thank you, Christine. Okay, now the earwomb of the Sparkle Motion song in D Darko. Earworm. Earworm? I think you meant earworm, Harriet. Let's see. Here we go. What else do we have here? Thanks, T. Whitten, for clarifying that. Rambo Jesus stealing that. I wish I had my images, my old website up. Because when it got converted, I lost all my images. I made the fucking best Rambo Jesus. And that's what I was talking about. I put Jesus on face on Rambo. It's gone. All gone. Let's see. To thy own self be true. Yes. Here we have Exnar Prime. The cross of 2017-2024 is Leo, Lion, Aries, Lamb, Ram. Fulfills prophecy of Isaiah. There you go. More symbolic proof of the time that we're living in. Thank you, Exnar Prime. Gaia Travelog. We have to be ready. Nasty things happening in Gaza will happen to the rest of the nations. We are living in Mad Max era. Unfortunately, yeah. We're all Gaza. Let's see. What else do we have here? Yes, it's a sadistic ritual. It is. Here we go. Sibylla Delphos. The eclipse conjunct asteroid Asmodeus. He was a demon who helped Solomon build the temple. I got a story. It's a weird story. It's a really weird fucking story. And it has to do with when I was growing up. And it's really funny because I was thinking about this family today. But I was thinking about one of the brothers in this family that I grew up with in the neighborhood in San Jose. And this actually has to do with his older brother who I was better friends with. So me and this guy used to hang out. We were tight. Like we did everything together. We played basketball together, played football together. We did a lot of stuff together. He was, but I was not a good influence on him. I was the kid that the parents said, we don't want you hanging out. I was that kid. And there'd be times I'd go to his door, like, hey, you want to hang out? You want to go do something? And most times they would say, hey, you want to come in? I would spend like 20 minutes, like sitting there, like talking to him at his door. And I think about 2 years or later, maybe it was like, I came back to the neighborhood. He was at his marriage. He was getting married. And I said to him, all that time I used to spend at your door, your dad didn't want me in your house, did he? He said, no. It's like, I get it. Okay, so here's the reason I'm bringing this story up, is that we had this teacher who taught English at our high school. And she's probably dead now. So I could probably use her name. And the last name was quite interesting. Her last name was Hazard, Mrs. Hazard. So there must have been a Mr. Hazard. How about that for a name? Mr. Hazard. Anyway, so he tells me that he was a grade ahead of me. And he tells me that he has her as his English teacher. And she apparently gets him into devil worship, right? Like, and he's telling me this. And he's telling me that she's telling him about these dark deities. And Asmodeus was one of these characters that he was talking about. And I'm like, I started to get worried for my friend. And he started to check out these books, like this fucking woman, this teacher was grooming him to be a young Satanist. I swear to God, I'm not lying here. And he told me that I didn't make the connection at the time, but he told me that he had this experience. He'd done something, right? He plucked something out of one of these books, and he'd done some kind of ritual, and all of a sudden his body was on fire, and he was sweating profusely, and so he started to have this physical phenomenon happen to him. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? So he says, hey, I want to go to the library and check out some more books. You want to come with me? Well, I'm like, sure, I'll come with you. And so we're going around the library. He's trying to find fucking devil books. And I found this book called The Late Great Planet Earth, and it's by Hal Lindsey, who was one of the first people to kind of popularize this idea of like Armageddon and the rapture and Satanism and popular culture. And I said, hey, look at this one. Look at this book. You should check this book out. Hoping that maybe he, cross those pages and then something might go off in his head. And I don't know what happened to him, right? I don't know what happened to him. We kind of lost contact. He became a cop, if I'm not mistaken. But it was weird. Here we have a high school teacher who's grooming a student to be a Satanist. I don't think that's uncommon, by the way. I think it's a lot more common than we understand. So then, here's the other part. So then the next year, I have that teacher, right? She's my English teacher. And we had to make her collage of something. And I thought, oh, she's into magical shit. I know what I'll do. So I went through a lot of my rock and roll magazines. And back then, a lot of bands wore makeup, right? Like you had Kiss and there's some other bands, Alice Cooper. So I cut out, all these images of these painted rock stars. And my title was a man revealing his symbols through the use of masks or some shit like that. Oh, she loved it. She loved it. She thought it was great. I got an A+ on it. So I used a bit of knowledge to get a good grade from Miss Witch. Okay, what else do we have here? Let's see. Yes, absolutely. The sodomite cult wants to humiliate and subjugate people. It's an exit-only orifice. Esoteric technique equals just perversion. Agree? Agree? Totally. The other thing, too, is that apparently if, let's say, for instance, you're a very powerful person, like a record industry mogul or a manager, somebody, right? So there's this theory that once you, how shall we say this, encode another being at a base level, that they are your slave. That there is something about the genetic transmission, the code within the DNA, the specific code that individual leaves, for lack of a better term. So it's also a way to not just humiliate, but subjugate, and that person is yours. right? So there's a whole world of like shit, pardon the pun, that goes on there. Let's see, who else do we have here? Some are including a third eclipse on the map. Well, the third eclipse was the one that happened in October, which makes an aleph. And that's a whole other discussion, which we've gotten into, like the aurochs. And the aurochs is the ox whose horns or head is caught in a barbed wire fence. So it's at an angle, right? So even the idea of a beast, and the ox being a beast of burden, and the beast being sacrificed in Jerusalem on the 10th of April is part of that narrative. Please don't mention what I say. I'm not saying, William, I rarely talk about you. It's all good. Jesus is a symbol of the self, Jung. Yeah, I think that's a Jung. A lot of wisdom there. A lot of wisdom. How the Pisces age comes in is how the Pisces age goes out. Let's see what else we have. The best story ever told, because it's a fiction. Modern, it's a 2,000-year-old idea from the Bible. No, it's not. No, it's not. No. The rapture, the idea of the rapture was popularized by John Nelson Darby and then Cyrus Scofield introduces the idea of the rapture through the Scofield Bible. And the Scofield Bible is a modern interpretation of the Bible. The rapture as an idea did not exist before John Nelson Darby. Look it up. Yahweh is a war deity, and the Talmudic extremists are fulfilling their own prophecy as an excuse to carry out an ethnic cleansing. Could be. I think timing is everything. Apocalypto was intense. Yes. Yes. It was intense. And what's the moral of the story of Apocalypto? It was the love of his wife and children. And this whole idea of reconnecting with them in a very powerful way that carries the day. There's a lot of other tales going on in Apocalypto, but that's it, right? It was the love. Love overcame the tribulation. It is intense. It's one of my favorite movies. Christine says the first exposure simulation theory feels nihilistic and like a cop-out. On further examination, it feels anything but that. Okay. Patricia says rapture is a harvest of consciousness, the demiurge of role-playing gods. We just sit back and watch the show. I like that interpretation, Patricia. Xnard Prime, you are welcome. Let's see. Robert has the best. I got a few stories. Some I can't even tell on the air. Let's see. Bad Phoenix. I was the bad kid. Not going to lie. Not going to lie. But, I had a good heart. I was a bad kid with a good heart. I wasn't a bad kid. I was a mischievous kid. I was a clever kid, but I never hurt anybody. Was not into bullying, not into torturing animals, none of that shit. Hated it. Don't feel too bad. It's a Scorpio rising for me. I get it. Well, I'm a Scorpio rising too, so we have that in common. I mean, it makes sense. 2027, the new age, planning going to the age of sleeping phoenix and a little chaos. The next 3 years are the most important. From 2026 through 2029. Huge. And then what happens after 2029? Well, it's 2030. And isn't it interesting that they have a little plan called Agenda 2030? There's a reason why they chose that time. They're on a timeline. What else we have? Agenda 21. What happened in 2021? The acceleration of the CV-19 and everything else went along with it. And 2020 was the ramp up to accelerate that. They were behind the curve. They were behind the timeline. And that's why it didn't happen completely. And I'm sure they were pleased with the 55 or 60%. But clearly, if they had gotten 80 or 90%, they would have been much happier. Let's see. What else do we have? We have all these religious extremes pretending to make a sacrifice to the red heifer, waiting for a new Messiah or end of the world. Yes, they're there. Let me transition to a story, which I think is kind of related to the red heifer. And this story actually has me troubled. And it is the mystery illness that has been spreading among cattle in Texas, Kansas, and New Mexico has been identified, and it isn't good news. And I look at this in the backdrop of this whole sacrifice of the red heifer, right? And clearly for a certain group, that means something entirely different or specific. But what if we just looked at it from a basic or primary kind of level, and that the slaughter of the red heifer is connected to cattle and cows in general? And we know that cattle and chattel sound a lot alike, right? Cattle and chattel sound a lot alike. What's also interesting, I'm just kind of riffing here, is like red, like red, the color red. You know, and I'm sure that there's biblical or Talmudic or whatever references to this. But I also think of like stories of these redheaded people that show up in places where they're not supposed to be. You know, like in China, that these redheaded people were found in these tombs, and they were not Asian, right? They were fair skinned and redheaded, and you know, and I'm sure that the Chinese were like, "What the fuck? What are these people doing here? They're not supposed to be here." There's stories about redheaded people populating New Zealand before the Maori arrive. The Maori actually arrive to New Zealand from Easter Island. The Maori people are not native to New Zealand, which is an interesting. And I found this out when I was watching this documentary. And there's really interesting folk tales that abound in New Zealand about these redheaded people, and also a group of I wouldn't call them dwarfs, but small, you know, kind of, I don't know, like leprechauns or elves. Like there was a group of people that lived in New Zealand that were like that, and then there were these pale redheaded people that were also there. And so this idea of this kind of race of pale redheaded people populating the ancient world, or the world that is often talked about, by people like Ben the Archivist or John Levi or Michelle Gibson. Like they're figures that show up in a very interesting way. And there's even this theory that Genghis Khan was not a typical Mongolian, but he actually had pale skin and red hair. And again, I'm just thinking out loud, right? We have this. It's not white, so it's not purely white or not purely black. It's red, and so it has to have some significance to the color red, right? Maybe it's because it's close to blood or whatever, right? But I just keep thinking about this group of people, and I don't know. Maybe this is an ancient grudge that's being worked out. Maybe this is what it's about. Maybe, who knows? Maybe it was the pale redheaded people that sacked the temple. I don't know. But there's an interesting connection to this event that's happening and kind of what's gone on, sort of, I wouldn't call it prehistorically, but I'll use the word prehistoric because it's a part of a history that we don't understand. It's pre our history. Okay, let's go into this. Officials have been greatly puzzled by a mystery disease that has been making dairy cattle in Texas, Kansas, and New Mexico very sluggish and has been causing them to produce much less milk. So they decided to do some testing. And now we have the results. It turns out the mystery illness is actually the same strain of highly pathogenic avian influenza that has been in the US for 2 years. All right, let me get this straight. Let me just try to understand this. Didn't they go through and vaccinate animals during COVID? I distinctly remember people going into zoos and vaccinating animals. So were these cows vaccinated? Question mark. Were they vaccinated? Is this what's causing this? Here, let's keep going. A mystery illness has been impacted dairy herds in the Texas Panhandle. New Mexico, Kansas now has a diagnosis, influenza A. USDA says genetic sequencing revealed the same strain of highly pathogenic avian influenza that's been in the US for 2 years. Okay. Does it leave species? APHIS says the National Veterinary Services Laboratory detected influenza A in samples from several impacted herds in Texas, Kansas, New Mexico. The virus is carried by wild waterfowl, which experts think is how the illness is spreading. So can it jump species? I don't know. I've heard that some of these things cannot jump species. So does the wild waterfowl shit and piss in the cow's water? Is that how they're getting it? The experts did not think the bird flu would be a threat to dairy cattle. Unfortunately, the experts were wrong. Scientists were able to confirm the presence of the bird flu by testing samples of milk from sick cows. According to USDA, as March 25, unpasteurized clinical samples of milk from sick cattle collected from 2 dairy farms in Kansas and 1 in Texas, as well as an oropharyngeal swab from another dairy in Texas, tested positive for the virus. Well, there goes your raw milk. Now that bird flu has been identified as the culprit, dairy farmers are being urged to strictly implement all standard biosecurity measures. What we got there. Let's see. This is from AgWeb. Let's go with this one for a bit. What are they going to do? They note it's important for producers to clean and disinfect all livestock watering devices and isolate drinking water that might be contaminated by waterfowl. So the idea is that they have these big metal like tubs, and that maybe the birds are shitting and pissing in their tubs. I don't know. That's what I thought when I read that. If that's the case, farmers are also being notified to notify their herd veterinarian if they suspect any cattle within their herd are displaying symptoms of this condition. Unlike affected poultry, I foresee there will be no need to depopulate dairy herds. Well, that's good. Cattle are expected to fully recover. The Texas Department of Agriculture is committed to providing unwavering support. Okay. But I also, and not to sound the alarmist bell, but hey. Again, it's coming out around the same time that they're going to kill this poor cow over in Jerusalem, which, by the way, came from Texas. Like, these are genetically engineered cows, generation after generation. One red cow breeding with another red cow, so that there is nary a spot of white nor brown nor black upon their hide. You know, it's also weird, right? Like, if you go back and look at the boat crash in Maryland, like, one of the images that's really striking about that boat crash are all these animal hides that are just sitting there floating in the water. Like, some of those containers were packed with animal hides. And I don't know what kind of animal hides they were. They were cow skin. I don't know what they were, but they were large. So again, it's weird, right? Like, there's all this intense cow and cattle symbolism and Taurus symbolism going on with Jupiter and Uranus, right, in the sign of the bull. And we have this cow being slaughtered in Jerusalem. We have this disease spreading through cows in Texas. We have the cows themselves, 4 of them, were bred in Texas for this ritual slaughter. And then we have all these animal hides that are floating in the harbor there in Baltimore. It's really odd symbolism, isn't it? Very odd symbolism. What else do we have here? Enhanced biosecurity. What does that mean? Meat still safe to consume. What is they don't say what the biosecurity is. And then they go on to say HPAI cannot be transmitted to humans by eating meat or poultry products. Okay. Symptoms of the illness last between 10 to 14 days. The exact cause of the illness is undiagnosed. So why are they telling us that it's a fucking bird flu? Sometimes they're just whistling in the dark, or they're lying. Clinical signs include a sudden drop in milk production. Some severely impacted cows are producing thicker, more concentrated colostrum-like milk. The problem causes a drop in feed consumption, the simultaneous drop in rumen function, compared to loose feces, and some fever. Impacted herds reported older cows in mid-lactation may be more likely to be severely impacted than younger cows. Fresh cows, or here's our favorite word of the day, heifer. Dry cows and heifers do not appear to be affected. There you go. There's your heifer. Some herds have been reported pneumonia and mastitis. Okay. So if you happen to have a cow, this is what you need to look for. So again, you know, here's this crisis that is taking place sort of at the same time they're going to slaughter one of their own in Jerusalem. It's very interesting timing. Let me just look at this for a second. Let me just look at this. All right. So there seems to be a dispute about whether cows receive the mRNA. I'm just kind of looking at this in real time. Okay. So I cannot point to any story that links mRNA with cattle. But that's not to say that it hasn't happened. Here's a story from Iowa State University. Of course, probably a paid study. Vaccines using mRNA can protect farm animals against diseases traditional ones may not. And there are safeguards to ensure they won't end up in your food. Oh, okay. Famous last words. So it looks like as of now, there's some safeguards around using mRNA in livestock. Let me just look at this real quick. Okay. But they're pushing it. They're really pushing it. Looks like they're on the brink, right? They're on the cusp of putting this thing into action. So it's from June 16th. All right. So we can't point conclusively to whether or not these cows have been vaccinated. So let's take that off the table because I haven't been able to find anything with a brief search. But you never know, right? You never know. And then we've got all this shit that comes down from our skies and does affect the water supply. And that's a whole different topic in conversation. But I did want to bring the cow story up because of the bigger story theoretically. And it wouldn't be very hard, right, to and I remember this when I was in England a long time ago. This is back in '84, and they had supposedly mad cow disease going through their herds in England. They were slaughtering like thousands of heads of beef in England. It was crazy, crazy. So there's a precedent for doing stuff like this. Okay, what else do we have? But yeah, I mean, they could somehow rig this thing so that cows become unsafe and eat the bugs. Eat the bugs. Red hair is the lack of melanin in the hair follicle. It's a genetic mutation. There's a group of people that were here. Like, for instance, there are pictures, like the Cherokee were a very diverse group of people. Like, you have some people in the Cherokee that look so-called black. You have some people in the Cherokee that look so-called Indian. And there are Cherokee who look pale and redheaded. This whole story of, this redheaded species or redheaded group of people that was around the planet is very interesting when you go down that rabbit hole. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Dr. Jones says redheads are hard to anesthetize. That's interesting. The Canaanites had red hair. Jacob, Israel, Esau, Palestine. Okay. Danielle says the USA will split up in states like California. Will take the transhuman way. Other states with more humans that don't want in their bodies will split the states. New monetary system emerges. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the balkanization of the United States, which has been ongoing, and we've already been balkanized. I mean, ideologically, the rift started in 2017, and it got wider in 2020. And when you look at the eclipse that started in 2017, it starts in Oregon at the 33rd state, and it ends at the 33rd degree parallel in Florida, cut the country in two, just like the Mason-Dixon line. A little higher, but still, right? And now this eclipse comes through, and we have the quartering of the country, which puts it into four distinct zones. Let's see. There we go. Red-headed alien mummies of Peru and Wyoming. Yeah, there's something about this red-headed species that was planetary, or whatever you want to call it, and then disappears. It's very interesting. Carolyn, been injecting cattle with mRNA jabs for a few years. Well, if they're doing it, it's going to be under the cover of no press. Because if you go through the press, which I just did, they're not exclusive. They're not specifically saying that. Now, to say that they haven't done it, I mean, they've been injecting animals with that shit as soon as it started. So it wouldn't surprise me. Let's see. Here we go. Green-eyed crow. The Mormons talk in great detail about the Rh negative Jesus and Mary Magdalene bloodline being hunted by the Vatican, the unicorn blood. Oh, there we go. Let's see. What else do we have here? Am I the only one having a deja vu moment if that Red Bull had already happened years ago? So I think Maya's having a Mandela effect. Anybody else? Shirley lives in the Virginia, Maryland area. Shirley, if you have any comments on the boat wreck that you want to drop in chat, please do so. I'd be happy to put them up here because you're not far from ground zero there. Yeah, I know they're definitely injecting animals. That fucking pissed me off. Raise your hand if you were pissed off when you saw them going into zoos and fucking injecting zoo animals. I was so pissed. It's like, leave them out. Leave them out of your genocidal program. Vaccinated livestock is for the Goyim. That's funny. Calvax makes sense. Yes. Let's see. What else? What else we have here? Zuli says they want to disappear cattle meat. So absolutely part of the program. So when you, again, right, let's look at the slaughter of the red heifer as a symbolic act for maybe all cows, right? I mean, sometimes it's just that simple. Let's see. What else do we have here? It's all diagnosed by PCR, which means it's all bullshit. So that's a really interesting comment. So my mother was, when we took her to emergency in Fredericksburg about a month ago, they wanted to do a whatchamacallit, a COVID swab of her nasal passage. And I said, don't do that. And my mother was looking at me. I said, don't do that. She said, well, why not? I said, is it necessary for a condition? And she said, no. I said, then you don't have to do it. So to your point, let's see. 7 directions. Here we go. I have dairy cows in Texas. We are ignoring all this garbage. Closed herd, healthy cows, raw milk is superfood. They want us eating bugs, not nutrient dense. I agree. Wholeheartedly. Let's see. Who else we have here? What else? What else we got? The so-called prion mad cow disease only exhibited in vaccinated animals. Who here thinks dementia is mad cow disease? I think it is. I think it's a dirty secret. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of animal skins in the harbor. Okay. So where they lay, the guy who projected out mad cow disease and sanctioned the mass killing UK was the same dude who projected the deaths UK. Oh, my God. Is that, what's his name? Nigel Ferguson? Isn't that the guy? Nigel Ferguson did that? The same guy that ran off and had an affair during COVID and broke his own protocols. That man is a menace. That's a menace. Let's see. Who else do we have? Brings up a good point here. Should the ceremonial magic ritual outcome be affected since the animal was genetically altered and not natural? Maybe it'll go wrong. Whatever is supposed to happen. Jelena says the timing of everything has been wild. Yes. I would agree with that. T. Witten, great question. What was in the containers? I remember when I asked that, what was in the trucker containers during the Canon COVID trucker protest? Response was, who the fuck cares? Inquiring minds want to know. You got to bring this up. Tiny hat cows are perfect, of course. And our cows are sick. That's another way to look at it, right, Steve? That's another way to look at it, for sure. What else do we have here? We got a smart group today in Chattaria. Great comments, by the way. Great comments. Here you go. Matt says they shot our cows up with the bird flu. You know, you bring up a good point, Matt, because you know they have these flu vaccines, right? And they don't have to be mRNA. And they vaccinate herds. So Matt, you got a great point. This is also interesting. States are banning geoengineering, aerosol geoengineering, right? I'm beginning to see this. About fucking time. That's all I can say. Amy says, I know Missouri tried to pass a law about not vaccinating cattle and lost. A lot of money involved in big pharma. A lot of money. Big pharma has made a lot of people very wealthy. Get that second and third home, right? Take your wife on vacation to Jamaica. Let's see. Susan says, don't believe anything you read or hear. Farmers and people are smart enough not to follow government advice. It costs dollars. And no one that loves animals would harm their own. I would agree with you, with the exception of one point. And that point is that a lot of farmers get government subsidy. A lot of farm people get government subsidies. And the government has been subsidizing farmers for quite a long time to keep the farms operable and profitable. And a lot of times there are agreements, spoken and unspoken, that go along with those subsidies. So I would say that fundamentally you are correct. And farms that are not subsidized have a greater ability to manage their herds or their crops by their own design. And others who are subsidized are compromised. All right, what else we have? Let's see. Okay. I'm looking for a little Shirley update here on the bridge. See if Shirley has any inside baseball. They killed the zoo animals. That so fucking pissed me off. I have to say, one of the things that angers me is the mistreatment of animals. I can't stand it. I hate it. Like, there was this guy during the George Floyd riots, right, who had stolen this puppy in Memphis, and it was later reported that he killed this puppy. And I was like thinking, I'm going to go down to Memphis. I'm going to track that motherfucker down, and I'm going to make him pay for killing the goddamn puppy. The one that was even worse was the video of the dude from North Africa barbecuing the cat on the street, and the old Italian lady is sitting there, like, chewing him out for barbecuing somebody's pet. And then, of course, you have somebody there sitting there with a fucking camera, videotape it. You know what you do? Here's what you do. You go and find the largest, heaviest, blunt object that you can physically handle, and then you go back and you stop the cat barbecue. You put your fucking cell phone down, and then you put an end to lunch. That's what you do. Here, let's videotape it. All right, so we got our first little missive from Shirley. The traffic going to Baltimore was eerily light last week. There wasn't a lot of traffic in fact, there was no traffic when the bridge went down. You saw it on the bridge before it happened, but not after it. You didn't see a dangling, tractor trailer rig go over the side, right? It seemed like there was no traffic when it actually happened. Here we go. I'm a Florida cattleman herdsman. We vaccinated all the calves for everything they can get, anything they want into the cattle. Thank you, Steve. Let's see. Barbara doesn't live that far from the bridge. Let's see. What else do we have? Here's some irony. Lana says, ironic that the whole vaccine coming back full circle to the cow pus injections in humans to now modified human pus into cows. It's all part of the circle of life. Zoracle Dax spreading the gospel. I told the checker at PetSmart this morning about the red heifer. She was very interested, but said they will never win. God wins always. There you go. That's a nice confirmation. Let's see. What else do we have here? The Eclipse cross at St. Louis, which is Ferguson, where BLM came to the fore, criticism of where Candace Owens got her start. Yeah, and Israel played a big role in that because the police chief, Ferguson, went to Israel for training. It was very popular back then. I don't know if it still is, but it was popular then. Let's see. How do you mean that, Robert? I don't understand. So I'm behind the curve, Leon. You have to remind me the question. Patricia says, I have red hair, green eyes. My DNA test shows my origins to have started pretty much in Turkey, Lebanon region, to be exact. Cool. We have any other gingers in here? Danielle White says, I was a vegetarian and vegan for 40 years. It was killing me. Yes, I did. I ate healthy meals. I did raw. Just ask Joan about the mouths of vegans. She'll tell you about the horror story of the mouths of vegans that she has to work on. It's real. Okay. Are we caught up to speed yet? I think we're pretty close. I think we're pretty close. Queen Lisa, hate to be a downer, but they're going to be forcing us to get rabies shots for our pets. They'll come after the pets. Look, here's what I think. Oh, this is interesting, Michael. My wife is a redhead and half Lebanese, same part of the world. There you go. Look, I think that they've got all these plans. I don't know if they're going to be able to accomplish all these plans. If rewind the show and go back to the beginning where I was talking about a cosmic event. And the cosmic event is the reemergence of the cosmic Christ on a conscious level through humanity. That everything historically has been done to distort and make sure that that moment does not happen. Ultimately, that's what I think it's about. And then deeper control. And we're living in this time right now where everything is lining up in a what I would call a very biblical sense in some ways. So who knows? Who knows? Who knows how long that this program is going to be going for? It can be a very different program with all the plans and all the the evil schemes of Klaus Schwab and Yuval Noah Harari and Barack Obama and a bunch of people we don't even know about. Right? At the end of the day, are they going to be a match for a type of energy that they have been desperately fighting against for as long as we can probably track it. I don't think they can. That's my take. All right. Are we good here? Is there anything else we want to talk about? What else do I have in my tabs? We got the cow thing, which I wanted to talk about. I think that's about it. Oh, you know what I need to do? Please don't go away. I also need to check in with Shirley one more time for the comment. I have to give my friend Chris over at True Hemp Science a little bit of a push here. You know, the only sponsor of the show, and True Hemp Science is your one-stop shop for all your CBD needs. And I know there's a lot of good CBD out there, but yeah, I've been working with Chris and his CBD products since he started making them, which was for me back in 2017. So we're going on 7 years now. And I remember him sending me his first like samples and concoctions. I get them in the mail and I try them. Like, man, this is really amazing stuff. So he's only gotten better and better and better over time and refining that process. So he uses organically sourced hemp for all of his CBD products, and he oversees the production of all of it, right? He doesn't outsource it to somebody else. He is the guy, right? Other people may do it, but he oversees it. So if you're looking for CBD and CBD related products to make a difference in your life, go to truehempscience.com, type in 15MINS. When you spend $100 or more, you get a free goodie bag with some really cool CBD products in it. If you spend $150 or more, you get free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. Always. So there you go. By the way, I am still in the business of being an astrologer and doing readings for people. And once I get back from my mother's memorial and have taken care of a lot of that business, I'll be more available for people if you're interested in a reading. And also, I know that some of you actually knew my mother and met her. And if you are interested in watching her memorial service online, I'll provide a link. And I think I'll send that out in the newsletter. And that'll be on the 13th. I think it's not very long. It's 45 minutes. But yeah, so if you want to watch that, I mean, hell, I stream everything. Why not a memorial service? So that's it for today. Thanks for being here. I don't think I have much more to offer, with the exception of an understanding of where we are in the so-called physical and spiritual universe. Like, these are really powerful times, and they're incredibly powerful. And it looks like the forces of doom are all lined up here to commandeer, the black hole sun. But I'm also here to tell you that there's something else going on, something bigger than even, these social engineers, these dark magicians that are firing three rockets named Apophis into the black hole sun. Even more powerful than that. And you're all a part of it. Don't forget it. All right. We'll be back on Sunday night. Take care. Bye for now.